Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses, that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way where there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves that the common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. And at this time, we'll have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern, or to bring more light into this room, or to be thankful for your mother would be another great thing today on this Mother's Day.
May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light, and softly serenade the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light, resounding with the sound, to sing with the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. The stars, ever dancing circles in the night. Resounding with the dawn, to sing with the light, resounding with the sound, to sing with the stars, ever dancing circles in the night. The stars, ever dancing circles in the night.
Now let us stand in body or spirit as we light the chalice and join in our spoken affirmation. The chalice we light today is a symbol of our faith. It binds us together as one people, a reminder that our strength is in our shared hope for the world, and that our common work is the creation of beloved community among ourselves and in the world. Let us join in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. May be seated. Our opening thought comes from Richard Schall, from his work, pedagogy of the oppressed. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which persons deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world.
As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free. Free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless creed, free from a social code that fails to serve the cause of human need. A freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
Our next reading is from Malala Yousafzai, from her work, I Am Malala, the story of the girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban. She writes, "Education is education. We should learn everything and then choose which path to follow. Education is neither Eastern nor Western. It is human." Let us join together in our time of meditation. We'll be reading from D. Scott Cooper, To Light the Darkness and Begin Again. Let us be in an attitude of meditation. There is a glow far off in the distance, a light to which no path leads. We know that each time we help another or join with them to heal the world, each time we stand up for justice and what is right, each time we work and hope and love against all odds, a spark is created that adds to the intensity of that light. We join with others who see and turn toward the glow. As we travel toward that beacon, the underbrush of indifference is flattened and a path is created. More are led to join us, and obstacles are kicked away, and a road is formed. Many approach the light, strengthened by our works, and we join them to each light a candle, Although many candles are lighted, the blaze never diminishes. We travel out into the world again to light the darkness and begin again. The cycle continues, our work intensifying the glow, and our joining with others to travel to the blaze and light our candles again. We continue knowing that one day we or our grandchildren, or perhaps their grandchildren, will no longer travel that widened and trodden path to light a candle, because dawn has arrived, justice is commonplace, and poverty is vanquished, and the beloved community stands illuminated in the fullness of daylight. Our next reading comes from Louis Yacco and his essay, Academia Deserves Its Crisis. He writes, "Now, is it not quite ironic that we may be coming to a day when we may find all kinds of full-time, steady, and secure jobs at universities, except jobs for educators? Does this tell us anything about the nature of the corporate plan attempting to strip academics and intellectuals of their voices? Does it tell us anything about a potential scheme to turn teaching into a purely affective form of labor that forces educators to behave themselves and not dare to exasperate the big corporate bosses ruling them, lest they lose the little money they earn from adjuncting?" Good to be with you, as always, on this Mother's Day. As I came to the idea of speaking on education today, perhaps it's partly connected to the fact that my mom has been an educator and in many ways is one of the most important persons in my own education. I remember as a very young child learning how to read because my mom would take one of those little machines that typed out words on tape, and she would put those words on every single item in the house. That's how I learned how to read, is because I had all these words taped on all these items in the house, and she was a grade school teacher and then a substitute teacher for many years. So I not only think of her today on Mother's Day, but also I'm thankful for her role in my education and the education of so many others. And then, of course, I think about education all the time because I'm involved in the enterprise of education. I've been at Oklahoma City University now for 27 years. I've seen the role of higher education change within our society over that time. I've seen the role of tenure change over that time. I've seen the movement towards using part-time adjunct professors in the education at our colleges and our universities increase over that time. I've also seen attitudes about educators and education change over the period of my life, and it's not been a very positive change overall. The attitude that society as a whole has about educators and education, I think, has declined during my lifetime, which I find to be a real problem within our community, within our society. Because I think it's difficult actually to overestimate the importance of education for the well-being and the functioning and the flourishing of our society, especially the flourishing of a democratic society. Education is one of the foundational elements of a just and participatory society. It is a key aspect of a working community, and it's a key aspect of working towards the goal of equality of opportunity for all persons. Without equitable access to quality education, it's difficult to foster justice and equality of opportunity within a society. We know from vast amounts of evidence that the happiest, least corrupt, best educated, most healthy, most free, most sustainable, and most flourishing societies all embrace and support pluralism of thought, pluralism of speech, and pluralism of action. And I think that the coordinated and sustained attack on educators and on education in the United States is a threat to pluralism of thought, pluralism of speech, and pluralism of action. In other words, it is a threat to freedom. It is a threat to human flourishing. I think it's important to remember that the goal of education is not simply the acquisition of knowledge, the acquisition of information, or even employment. The goal of education is the cultivation of wisdom. And wisdom is the synthesis of knowledge, virtue, and justice for the flourishing of all persons within a community. I think it's critical to keep this goal of wisdom in mind, especially given the coordinated efforts to reduce all education to job preparation. Education is not only about preparing us for labor and work within our economy, it's also about preparing us for free and participatory action within our shared world. Now, being in higher education for 27 years in many different roles in higher education, I have met with many families and their students prior to their arrival at OCU. And one of the most common questions that I get from parents, I bet you can guess what that question is, and that question is, will my child get a job after college? What are the prospects of employment for our child after they complete college? And my response is almost always something like this. Yes. They will very likely get employment and get a job after they finish their college time here at the university. But also, hopefully, they will be more prepared for life, and they will be more prepared to participate as a free person in society for the well-being of all persons. In other words, education ought to prepare us to be a free person fully participating in a free society and not simply prepare us for a job. Jobs are not unimportant, employment is important, but the cultivation of wisdom and participation in society as a free person is even more important. And the most flourishing societies in the world get this. The most flourishing societies in the world understand this. And this is why those flourishing societies are going in the opposite direction of my home state of Oklahoma, just across the river, when it comes to K through 12 and higher education, which is precisely why I think Oklahoma continues its precipitous decline, going lower on all the lists you don't want to go lower on, and going higher on all the lists you don't want to go higher on. But what's happening in Oklahoma is actually happening all over the country to varying degrees. It's well documented that since the early 1970s, there's been a well-funded, well-coordinated, and unfortunately very effective effort by various forces in corporate America to weaken the role of the liberal arts in higher education, to weaken the role of the liberal arts in higher education. In fact, there's been a whole process of prioritization over the last 2 decades in higher education that has systematically weakened the role of liberal arts within universities and colleges all over the country. And also, there's been a coordinated, well-funded, and highly effective program to lessen the societal influence of progressive religious institutions. Weakening higher education, weakening public education, also weakening the societal influence of progressive religious institutions. Because apologists for corporate America rightly saw that higher education and progressive religious institutions were the primary sources of criticism of the injustices of our corporate-controlled economic and political systems. They rightly saw that, and they have taken systematic action to address it. One cannot fully understand this well-funded, this sustained effort to weaken moderate to progressive mainline denominations, and also to weaken publicly funded media, public education, and higher education in the United States without reading the 1971 Powell Memo and its blueprint for corporate America to maintain and expand its economic and political power. Now, the Powell Memo was about a 12-page document, reads almost like a manifesto, that was written by Lewis Powell in 1971. He wrote this to the National Chamber of Commerce just prior to his appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States. whether there was any connection between his writing this memo in 1971 and very shortly after being appointed to the Supreme Court, one will never know. And also how much the Powell memo actually influenced the movement of continued corporate dominance over our political and economic systems can be debated. Whether it had any demonstrable influence on what happened after it was written, that can be debated. But what cannot be debated is that Powell lays out in significant detail in 1971, he lays out what has played out in ways that we see over the last 50 years in relation to the role of corporate dominance in America. We see this playing out also even up to this very day, where attacks on the integrity and vitality of public education and higher education throughout our society continue to be made. If you go back and look at his blueprint for what he thinks corporate America should do to have control over media, to have control over education, to have control over all the various aspects of economic and political life in the United States, it's played out in a very similar way to what he was calling for. If you look today in Oklahoma again, looking at my home state, if you look today at the current attempt to defund the Oklahoma Education Television Authority, also known as OETA, I think this is connected to this ongoing movement towards corporate control of media and education. When the Oklahoma governor points to, quote, Oklahoma values to justify the defunding of OETA, which, by the way, is the most watched state public television station per capita in the whole country. A lot of people don't realize that about OETA. It's an interesting history why that's the case, but it's the most watched public television station per capita in the whole country. This is a classic fascist move. Using rhetoric like this, Oklahoma values, makes it seem that something like Oklahoma values can only mean one thing. And to be a true Oklahoman, you must hold a homogeneous set of values held by true Oklahomans. Such rhetoric, such ideology behind it have been used over and over again throughout history to oppress those who hold views and values that are different than the majority view. It's an extremely dangerous totalitarian tendency that in my state we're seeing play out over and over again. Maybe Texas is seeing this happen as well. To understand the use of the language of, quote, Oklahoma values as a strategy to defund OETA, and also as a strategy to ban teaching about the reality of racism in our history and in our present, it's helpful to look at what totalitarian states in the past have done and to read about efforts of propagandists to bring about the synchronization of culture in order to suppress minority views and values. Anytime an appeal to, quote, common values is used to ban or suppress certain forms of speech, certain forms of action, and open expression that do no harm to others. That's the key. These are forms of speech, action, and expression that do no harm to others. In fact, often are doing openly good things for others within our society. Anytime that rhetoric is used, that ideology is used, true freedom is in jeopardy. Remember that every time that someone makes an appeal to Oklahoma values or Texas values as a way of justifying the defunding of a public program that is helpful for the human community and contributes to the public good. Access to quality public education is essential for the equality of opportunity within our society. It is crucial for the maintenance of pluralism, justice, and freedom within our society. The goal of a beloved community is inextricably linked to equitable access to quality education that includes information acquisition, that includes job training, but that also focuses on the cultivation of wisdom for full participation in a free and pluralistic society. A truly beloved community requires love, requires social justice, environmental justice, also today requires climate justice. And education is one of the most important forces for comprehensive and holistic justice within our society. Without education, a realistic hope for a better future and beloved community is greatly diminished. And I think one of the most important things we can do in the world today for the flourishing of all humanity and for the flourishing of all life, both now and in the future, is to defend education from those who would simply use it as a tool. And they're simply using it as a tool for unjust economic and political power. This, I think, is one of the great dangers that we're facing within the human community today, is the use of education and the suppression of free and equitable access to education in ways to support and further unjust economic and political power. Together, we need to work against these efforts to make sure that education is free and accessible for all persons so that all might have the equality of opportunity to live fully and freely as participating citizens in a vibrant democracy. And at this time, we'll have an opportunity to freely participate in giving. You can give at the table, or you can also give online as well.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free. Oh, make us free.
Let us stand in body or spirit for our parting thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from J. Krishnamurti from the work Education and the Significance of Life. To understand life is to understand ourselves, and that is both the beginning and the end of education. Let us join in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Maybe sometime I'll get to Chile.